Is a bariatric podcast talking about weight loss surgery. I am not a licensed professional. Any views and or opinions expressed in the show are those of the speakers and do not reflect the bariatric community as a whole. Always reach out to a professional with any medical issues you are experiencing. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unzipped with Sherry, with yours truly. Of course, I am Sherry. Wanted to give a special shout out and a thank you to Ken for last week for joining me on my special Surgiversary episode. I am not used to being the one in the hot seat, which I did not enjoy nearly as much as I like putting you guys in the hot seat. But I'm very appreciative that he was able to join us. If you would like to celebrate your own story, if you'd like to share your story with us on the show, or if you want to share an NSV or your Surgiversary or whatever you want, make sure you reach out to me. I would love to have you on the show. And also, thank you so much to everybody who's been giving us feedback on the show. I know one of the issues is that you guys actually want to see the comments from everybody else. So I'm going to try to put the comments to air live on as well with us. And I hope that you're going to be joining in live and you're going to be asking questions, because today we have a very special guest. Her name is Kayla Girgen, and she is a bariatric dietitian. And she is also the founder of Life, which stands for Lose It Forever. And I'm very excited to get to pick her brain a little bit and talk about nutrition and the dietitian part of it, because I think there's a lot of questions that we all have that we're hoping that she can answer for us. And make sure that you comment, ask your questions so that we can address them live on the show. So Kayla, I'm so excited. I hope you're ready, because we're about to get unzipped. We all have a story on how we got here, right? So for me, I used to be over 350 pounds until one day I made the single decision that I wanted change. Weight loss surgery has saved my life, and now I am here for you. I want to hear your story. You know, the one that happened during that before and after picture. It's time to unzip. What's your story? Hello, Miss Kayla. How are you today?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I am so excited that you were able to join us today. I know that we're going to have a lot of questions for you, so I hope that you're ready to be put in the hot seat today.
Yes, I am always ready for the hot seat. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank God, because I don't like being in the hot seat, which is why I'm so glad when other people enjoy it. I just want to ask all the questions. For those who are watching right now, why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory on how you got into being a dietitian, and then more specifically, what brought you to the bariatric side of it?
Mm-hmm. I think the story goes hand in hand. So maybe if you don't mind, I'll explain a little bit on like how a dietitian becomes a dietitian, because I
Absolutely.
think for the longest time I had no idea what a dietitian actually was. So I actually was kind of in a corporate job at a desk job and really not loving it. And I started working on my personal trainer certification as like my way out. I'm like, I'll build my clientele, that'll be my step out. And then along my personal training journey, I discovered like, okay, like to prescribe diets and really get specific on nutrition, that's the scope of a dietitian. I'm like, well, that's what I want to do. So
Right.
I ended up going back to school so I was later in life. I was like one of the oldest people in my class. So I think I was 25 going back to college. And I graduated with a 4-year degree in dietetics or nutrition. And for those of you that don't know, so there's kind of a few boxes that you check for being a dietitian. So the first one is a bachelor's degree, and that will actually soon be a master's degree. And so in order to sit for the test in a couple of years, you'll actually have to have a master's degree. And then you go through this process called like your dietetic internship, which is essentially like a residency. So you think of like doctors do the residency, you get kind of put into all of these different kind of specialty areas. And during my internship, one of the first spots that I landed was actually on a bariatric surgical floor. And
Really?
yes, so it was like my second rotation. I was super fresh out of school and just getting like my toes wet in the clinical space. And I absolutely loved it. So I just like really thought the combination of physiology, like all of the anatomy changes after surgery, along with the psychology component. So when we look at like all of the mindset work and like how those two
Yes.
marry together, I was like this is amazing. And just like working with patients and really kind of meeting them where they're at, because everybody was so individual. So after my internship, you pass your test and then, hopefully land a job somewhere. So
Right.
I landed in a weight management clinic, and that's where I most recently left about a year ago to start my own practice. And just really working in like a surgical clinic, I recognized again that the journey after surgery is so unique, and you can't just hand somebody a binder and ask all of these things of someone and then,
Right.
expect that that can just be replicated, because it's not one size fits all, as I think everybody here probably knows. And just recognizing all of those support gaps, I wanted to kind of step outside the clinical space and help people in a, maybe more like individualized fashion. So here
Yeah.
I am.
Like first of all, this is completely off topic, but I love how you said that you went to school late because you went to school at like 25. And I'm sitting here
Yeah.
listening, going, I went back to college. I think I was like 34
Yeah.
or something like that. And I'm like, okay, now I feel really old. Um, but first and foremost, I'm really glad that you brought that up because, you and I have talked. I've had my surgery 8 years ago, and I was literally just given a straight packet. Like that was
Mhm.
my entire aftercare of what to eat for each week up until like week 8. And then you're kind of like, have at it. Just, don't kill yourself or like overdo it. Um, it wasn't until like as the years were going on and you're starting to talk to these support groups, and then some people are doing this liver shrinking diet, and I'm like, well, I didn't have to do that. And then some are like fighting on Facebook, like, you can't have a straw. Well, I can have a straw. Well, my doctor said that I can have gummy vitamins. Well, my doctor said that I can't. And you're learning that like every single doctor, it seemed, almost had like their own specific, post-op plan. And I always thought that was really fascinating. um do you have any insight into that as to why it's so different for everybody?
A lot of times it's driven by the surgeon, I would say. So a lot of like the clinic I was at, a lot of our recommendations kind of fell from the surgeon, and anything that we wanted to maybe change as a team, we would kind of bring to him. So I would say that. And unfortunately, I think sometimes just like our research and our education for physicians isn't always like up to speed. So
Hmm,
they're behind, believe it or not. And then insurance companies are way behind. So I know that insurance companies drive a lot of what happens in the clinic as well.
that
And
makes
that
sense.
it's like, okay, our research is behind, and then our education for physicians. And so unfortunately, I think that's really put a barrier on, access for surgery for a lot of people, unfortunately. And let me see, I'm kind of rambling off on your
No,
question,
no, you're
but
fine.
so surgery, but when it comes down, I think, to like the individual basis, I think that there tends to be a lot of follow-up to like in those initial days with clinics.
Mhm.
And then when we look at like the individual level, like for patients specifically, the further you get out, I think a lot of times there's less and less follow-up. And I think that that's when you need it the most. And unfortunately, a lot of times that comes down to patient access for insurance as well. But now I
Yeah.
think you see a lot more people like traveling abroad and getting surgery, in other countries. And I've heard nothing but good things, but I think again, there's just like that lack of support for patients,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Which is really unfortunate too. Now, I'm curious, in your line of work, do you deal more so with like the pre-op appointments, or are you more like post-op, like maintenance?
I do so primarily post-op. I do have a few people. So I have a group coaching program. So I recognize that Facebook groups are not the best. There's maybe some good ones out there, but I think there's a lot of bad ones. And like you said, it's like you get that like he said, she said with
Yeah.
like what their physicians are saying. And I think there's just a lot of poor advice. So I wanted to make a private community where people could come and connect. So I work specifically with women for the most part after surgery, and we do a lot of support and education through there. But I do work with a handful of people one on one too.
Okay, great. And so I'm really curious because, and like I said, like when you're in these groups, like everybody's like post-op requirements are different. Now, I know people who've had the surgery that can easily drink a gallon of water every day. And I'm like, I am not one of those people. 8 years out, if I'm once I get to like 64 ounces, like I'm ready to keel over at one point. Like I physically cannot consume that much. And I remember this year I've talked to like two different trainers throughout the year, And I was like, I'd like to lose a couple of pounds. I want to start toning up. And they're like, well, first and foremost, how much protein are you consuming? And I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm supposed to have like 50 to 60 grams. And he goes, no, you need to eat your weight in grams of protein. And I'm like, and I explained to him that I had surgery. I'm like, I don't think I can physically consume that much
Mhm.
protein. And I've talked to other, and then when you talk to the bariatric side of it, they're like, no, I don't think you're supposed to do that either. So can you help like clear it up for me? Like, now I know that when you first have the surgery, there's certain specific guidelines to make sure that you're, getting all of your proper nutrients in. Does the dietary requirements as far as how much protein, water, etc., does it change over time, or is it pretty much consistent, like whether you're a year out, a day out, or like 10 years out?
That's a great question, and I would say
Oh,
the
thank you.
recommendations probably don't change. However, like, your tolerance, so, like, if you're in those early days, so I'm thinking, like, maybe 1, 2, 3 months post-op, you're probably not gonna hit your protein goal every single day, and
Right.
generally, I think for, like, broad spectrum recommendations, it's usually 60 to 80 grams of protein per day. So,
Okay.
I typically tell my people aim for 20 to 30 grams a meal. So, if you think 3
Oh,
meals a day, that's a good way to space it out throughout the day, and then if you can, I think then we work in some of the other macronutrients too, like your fats and carbs, of course, because we wanna kind of they're all important.
right.
But, as far as water goes, I know initially kind of same thing, you're probably not gonna be able to hit 64 ounces on, day 2 post-op, but
Right.
typically, I would say at that 2-month mark, you're probably back to, like, maybe pre-op, but everybody's so different, and I think that's what makes it really challenging too, and then I think from the patient perspective, it's a little bit nerve-wracking when you're like, "Oh my gosh, I see somebody commented, like, I can drink a gallon of water," and
Right.
some people think that's scary and maybe don't feel normal, or, vice versa, you're like, "Okay, well, maybe can I drink enough because I still feel my restriction?"
Hmm.
So, I think it gets a little bit tough because everyone is so individualized, but as far as fluid, I would say 64 ounces tends to be the way to go, but, I mean, I have some people that have a hard time getting 50 ounces in and
Yeah.
some people that get a gallon of water in a day, so
Okay. So on average, like, so somebody like me who's like 8 years out, it's as long as you have like maybe a minimum of 64 ounces, you should be in the clear, and like 50 to 80 grams of protein, you should be in the clear.
Right, so protein 60 to 80 grams, yes, and then
Mm.
usually fluids, I would say again, like the 64 ounces is perfect.
Okay.
Um, I would say if you can do a little bit more, awesome, but again, everybody's restriction is so different. I
And
would
I'm
say
sure
to clarify, just even, like, not looking at ounces, but, like, the color of your urine might be a little bit more specific to you, so if you're
that's
looking, like,
true.
to get, like, that light, like, pale lemonade color,
Hmm.
that's gonna be a better indicator of, like, your overall hydration versus, like, okay, 64 ounces because,
Right.
some people are in bigger bodies, some people are smaller, and you might need a little bit more water depending on which way you go.
And I think I'm so glad that you said that too, because I know that a lot of people, I mean, we have this incessant need to compare ourselves to what other people are doing.
Mhm.
And I can, like, even I've had people tell me, like, oh, I can drink a gallon of water by noon. And I'm like, by 9 o'clock at night, I can't even get to the 64 ounce. I feel like I'm going to keel over. And there's a part of you that almost feels like you're a failure because you can't drink as much as somebody else. You can't consume as much as anyone else. And I do love that you basically just like everybody's different, like we all are going to react differently, and yes, there's some certain guidelines, but you kind of like know your body. And I do agree, like urine is a great testament, because when I did the 75 hard challenge earlier this year, and like I said, my goal was 72 ounces a day, and I struggled for 75 days every day to get that in.
Mhm.
But I peed like 5 times in the middle of the night every single day and I was like, at no point did it get easier. So I knew that, like, at one point, like, you're just peeing water. Like, that's what
Mhm.
it just, I feel. And I'm like, okay, so maybe I don't need to, maybe my body can just handle this amount of water. It doesn't have to push or eventually try to increase to a gallon. And like, you're right. Everybody's different.
Mhm, and people don't like that answer because, like you said, we want, like, numbers and we want
Right.
comparison, and I think we just, like, want, like, some specific guidelines and structure to follow, so when it's like, "Oh, listen to your body," it sounds, like, a little bit, fluffy, but I think
Right.
that that's a part of surgery too, is, like, really kinda discovering, I think, a lot of yourself, but then, like, what
Mhm.
works for you in terms of nutrition too.
Yeah, and that was one reason why I was so glad that I came across your page on TikTok, was because when I was talking to you, you make like almost like these individual plans for each person, because every single person's different. You're not giving out like this cookie cutter, plan that everyone must follow, because anybody who's dealt with obesity, like we know, not, Weight Watchers is not for everybody. Jenny Craig is not for everyone. Paleo, Whole 30, keto, everything. Some things work for some people and some things don't work for others. So and especially like we've said in the community, you're seeing so many different opposing views on the same topics, that I love that you can work with somebody one-on-one. And like, so when somebody comes to you for the first time post-op, let's say hypothetically they've had some regain or they've hit a stall and they're like, you know what, I'm ready, I need to make a change, I need to do something different. And they're like, Kayla, talk to me, what do I
Mhm.
do?
Yeah. I would say so the number one factor I see for a lot of people is, like, grazing. And when we look at,
Mm-hmm.
like, research, like, grazing is one of the number one things that leads to regain. So, typically, if you think of, like, grazing as, like, nibbling throughout the day, you're just, like, not getting any satisfaction from your meals. Your insulin, so basically, like, the hormone responsible for storing fat
Mm-hmm.
is high all day long. So usually that's the first thing I look at is like meal time, like how often are you eating? Because if we can, get a little bit structure there and then also work on what to eat. So I like to think of like what to eat and how to eat to kind of break that down. So I do have a grocery list I'm happy to share with your audience too. That's just like a free download and it's the one I
Yeah.
use for my program. So I don't know if I can drop that in the chat. Otherwise I can send it to you. And
Okay.
that's typically, a lot of times where we start is like food selection and then how can we time that properly. So typically it's like if you can get to the 3 meals a day, awesome. But I know depending on like hunger levels too, you might have to incorporate like a snack or possibly two.
Mm. Okay, so I have a question, and I feel like it's a very taboo question within the bariatric community. And I'm specifically asking it now because you just posted a TikTok about it today.
Yeah.
Um, what is your opinion on straws?
Yes. So straws, I feel like that's yes. Why is this so taboo?
I
I
don't
guess
know.
I
People
should like
fight.
I should back up and be like, my philosophy is just like, let's not make things harder than they need to be. Like,
Right.
after surgery, you have so many things to worry about, like fluids and protein and vitamins, and like, let's just like not overcomplicate things. But I say, like, in those early days, like after surgery, like maybe avoid a straw. Just, some people think it can draw extra air into the stomach. I would argue that so does talking, so maybe like if you're really worried about it,
That makes a lot of
yeah.
sense.
But otherwise, like once you get further out from surgery and a straw helps you, reach your fluid goals and you can use it without discomfort, then do it. I'm all for it.
Okay, you heard the woman. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
everybody's different. Some people cannot
Right.
tolerate it. Now, what's interesting is there's some days where I can drink it from it no problem, and other days it gives me the hiccups, which is probably because you're swallowing too much air. But then again, we've joked on a prior show, I get the hiccups every time I have a hard boiled egg. So does it mean I should never have hard boiled eggs again? I would like to
Mhm.
think not, but
Mhm.
obviously, I'm not telling everyone to go run out and start taking straws tomorrow. Like, obviously, you know your body better than anyone, but it's
Mhm.
nice to know that you think it's okay.
Yes. Yeah, so I give it the green check mark. Again, if it's not causing you discomfort, then go for it.
Okay, I love that.
And
Now,
if you don't mind, like, just, like, plugging into, I think, like, one of the big things, like, looking at nutrition after surgery, it's like, even before protein, like, hydration should be your first goal. So, if you feel like not using a straw is limiting you, then there's all the more reason.
yeah, I have heard people say that, drinking from the straw, they just get more fluid in throughout the day. So in
Mhm.
my head, I'm like, if that's working for you and it's not causing you pain, like do whatever you do to get that water in.
Right. Well, and I have, like, mine right here. It's just, like, it's convenient and you
Yeah.
it's a more accessible, I guess. Mhm.
Yeah. No, I love it. Now I have a question. Because I don't even think I've really asked my doctor in years, but when it comes to like vitamins and supplements, do you think like the requirements change as time goes by, or do you think like the same basic vitamins should be consistent from like surgery onwards?
It depends. So usually like pre-op, they're checking for like nutrition deficiencies because before surgery, ideally that's corrected. So like a couple things that tend to pop up, like vitamin D deficiency or is usually quite common before surgery. So it's like if you remember, back to pre-op days, if you had to supplement extra just to bring those
Mhm.
levels up to normal. But typically if you're going into surgery, with everything within normal range, then I would say yes. However, a lot of times the further out from surgery you get, the higher your risk for nutrient deficiencies.
Really?
So, yes. Yes. So if you think of like a lot of things, like your body holds onto stores for a lot of things like B12, like vitamin D, vitamin A, but depending on some of those vitamins, like what your body is able to kind of put in its reserves is
Mhm.
different based on certain vitamins. So once your body runs out, then if you think of like, what your portions look like before surgery and after, it's like sometimes even a supplement might not be able to get you back to those levels just because maybe you're depending on your surgery, maybe your
Right.
anatomy or absorptions changed. But the further you get out from surgery, the more important it is to like keep up on your labs just to know. So again, if you're going into surgery, like everything within normal range, I would say generally, if you're getting like a bariatric multivitamin, those are they're dosed a little bit higher on certain nutrients to
Okay.
help prevent those things. If you're doing something like a Centrum or a Flintstones, I would try to get into a bariatric vitamin like sooner than later.
Interesting.
Hmm.
I'm just curious. You might not know the answer to this, but
Hmm.
do you know like if it's frowned upon to have like gummy vitamins, or if it's better to have like a pill or capsule?
Ooh, good one. So typically like that first few months I say like try to do a chewable and
Yeah.
not gummies. So a lot of times like your gummies they don't have like iron, which is really important and a lot of people again like go either into surgery with, low iron stores or kind of get low iron stores over
Yeah.
time. So the gummies typically don't have as many of your minerals and they tend to have like a lot
Oh.
of fillers.
Oh.
So you think of like, what they're it's like a gummy bear,
Yeah.
essentially.
That's
So
why I
you've
eat
got like
them.
more carbohydrate fillers and all of that. But then I think with those too, it's like the serving size. Like if you look at the serving size, it might be, two or three gummies to get
Mhm.
you what's actually on the label. But if you're taking one of so a third of the serving, you can
Right.
really like get yourself in deficiency really fast. And then and then at, like 3 months and beyond, like post-op, then a lot of times I would say, like, if a tablet or a capsule is more convenient and you can tolerate
Yeah.
it, then go for it.
Like obviously I know that we should be probably better to have the capsule. And I because in the gummies, like there's like you said, there's other fillers in there,
Mhm,
like gelatins and stuff like that. But I'm sorry, some of these pills are like horse pills, and
mhm,
I can't do it. And then I've tried cutting them in half, and then like sometimes I take the pill, and then it gets stuck on the roof of my mouth, or it gets stuck on my tongue, and it starts to dissolve.
mhm.
And it's like so terrible that I'm like, wait, the gummies taste good, and then I get
Right.
my vitamin.
Mhm. Well, and I think too after surgery, like, a lot of people they get nauseous, like, whether
Hmm.
it's, like, a multivitamin or, like, calcium, they can get, really, like, stomach upset too. Mhm.
Oh, somebody wrote it, blend them into a shake. That's actually a good
Mm.
idea.
Yes.
There was a liquid vitamin that I found many years ago. I think it was like Natural Vitality or something. It tasted terrible,
Mhm.
but I used to put that in a juice in the morning, and then it kind of like, I'm going to maybe try that. But I really like the gummies though.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as like if somebody's like over 5 years out, like you said, it depends on your blood levels, which obviously it's always good to get your physical every year and to make sure that your levels are within normal. Are there ones that you would recommend that should be really important, like whether it's are you still taking calcium 8 years out? Are you still taking like zinc or B12 and
Um, okay, so this is again, like, gonna maybe light some things up because I tend to,
oh,
like, go against the grain on a couple
okay,
of the vitamin recommendations, so I would say multivitamin, always yes. So,
100%.
again, if you're doing, like, a bariatric multivitamin, generally, they have extra B12, they have extra D, and then extra of, like, your zinc and copper and, like, some of those minerals. The calcium, to be honest, I'm not a big fan.
Hmm.
So Yes. Oh yeah, and somebody's talking about the teeth issue. I think maybe you and I might have talked about this, but so my recommendations as far as calcium go is yes, calcium's important, but if you can get it from your diet, please do it that way. Just because what we're starting to learn with more research is that calcium supplements, especially with women, can lead to more cardiac events down the road. So, like hardening of
Interesting.
arteries. So, if you can get it from your diet, so things like dairy products, even if you do a lot of like protein shakes, protein powders, look at the label. And, a lot of those are dairy based. So, you'll
Which has
probably notice
calcium
like,
in it.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
I've had some people like just look at what they're getting from their diet. If you're doing a Greek yogurt a day and cheese and a protein shake, it's like, you're probably almost to your goal of like, typically I
Right.
tell people like 1200 milligrams a day. But if you can get it from your diet and then maybe make up for it in
Yeah.
supplements if you're not there, but try not to rely on supplements. Just
And like we
Mhm.
said, it's always good to talk to your doctor and get your blood work done, because for some people getting it through food might not be enough. Their numbers might be too low where they need the extra supplement. Jen is actually going to be on a future episode, and that's an issue that we are going to talk about, because I didn't know that that was an issue in the bariatric community. I didn't know that there was an I knew about the hair loss.
Mhm.
I didn't know about transfer addiction when I had it, and I didn't know that people had teeth issues or the issues that you can have as a result of vitamin deficiencies, which is why it's so important to talk to your doctor and make sure you know exactly what supplements you need,
Mhm.
whether you can get them from food or through a pill form or a gummy form, because I like the gummies.
Yeah.
Um, but making sure that you have everything that you need.
Do
So
you mind if I add a little bit more on the calcium?
this is your
So
like you have
okay.
free reign right now. This is about you
There's just a
today.
couple there's a couple things. So a lot of times, like, so you say you go in for, like, your annual lab check too, oftentimes they're checking, like, serum calcium, and your body is really good at keeping that within a really, really tight range. So it's not always an accurate measure of like what your actually bone density is. So if you can, or if your insurance would cover like something like a DEXA scan, that's actually
Hmm.
going to show like more of like what your actual bone density looks like versus looking at a calcium serum lab, which is not real accurate. And before you ever take calcium, make sure that your vitamin D is within normal range. So I would say vitamin D number 1 and then calcium, because then you're going to get the best absorption that way.
And what is that test called? I'm going to write this down.
A DEXA scan,
DEXA scan.
so think of it's almost like body composition, but it's checking more specifically like your bone density.
Okay.
I can't remember what it's an acronym. I can't
Oh,
remember what it stands for.
no, I'm not. There's not
It's a
going to be a
lot of
pop
big
quiz
long
at the end of
words.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also, okay, and you learned this the hard way 8 years ago when there wasn't, people to talk to about this. There's
Mhm.
certain calcium supplements out there that don't have magnesium with it, or don't
Mhm.
have the thing that makes you have to go to the bathroom. And
Mhm.
I joke, I wrote an entire chapter in my book about a single experience that has forever changed my life. And it was a result of the calcium. I had just switched calcium supplements, and I guess it didn't have magnesium or didn't have a fiber, whatever it was. So make sure that you're taking the correct kind of calcium for our bodies, for sure.
Mhm.
So bad.
And I know somebody said too, as far as like lactose intolerance, like just like having a higher occurrence of that after surgery is common. So even
Hmm.
whether it's like sleeve surgery or gastric bypass, a lot of times like what that is, like that lactose will actually like it's a sugar, so it'll draw in like extra water into your intestines, and then
Hmm.
that's where you get things like gas and bloating and
Yeah.
diarrhea. So it's not uncommon, but some of your big offenders are going to be things like milk and ice cream. Those are the big ones. I would say third is probably Greek yogurt, but things like cheese, like protein powders that are maybe whey based, those are generally pretty well tolerated unless you're really sensitive.
Oh, that
Hmm.
makes sense, because people who know me know I love my cheese and I'm not going to give it up. And
Hmm.
some cheeses can affect you differently, but milk, forget about it. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not going near it. Somebody just recently, I've just been learning Fairlife apparently is really popular in the bariatric community according to
Hmm.
TikTok. I had never heard of it before. But I just heard that that's a lactose free milk, correct?
It is. Yep. And it is higher protein. So you'll notice on the label that the Fairlife, so it's got lower sugar and it's got higher protein. And even like a lot of like other milk brands will do even just like lactose free. Cause I know
Mhm.
the price has kind of shot up on Fairlife, but you can even do just like a regular milk that has lactose filtered out too.
Yeah, and that's what I need to, because I'll drink almond milk, but I've noticed like Greek yogurt is hit or miss for me. Some days it's fine, other days it affects me. And I'm like, how, like it's the same brand, it's the same flavor. It's just our
Mhm.
bodies just react all the time differently. Now I'm curious to ask you, because you talk to people all the time. What are some of the most common questions that you get asked from people who are post-op? Is there like a theme to like what people are usually asking you?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm just full of good questions
Yes,
today.
that's a hard one because I think a lot of people just don't know where to get started. I think a lot of times, like, people don't generally reach out to me when things are, like, honky dory and, like, going
Mm,
awesome.
true.
Usually, it's like we're talking because you hit a stall or
Yeah.
maybe you're stuck or you've been off track, and I think it's just like, how do I get back to the basics? So that's where, like, in the beginning, we talked about, okay, let's look at what you're eating and meal timing. Like, let's look at one thing at a time, and I think there's so many factors involved in weight loss too that are underestimated. So we think of things like, well, you hit a stall. Let's look at like your stress or sleep
Mhm.
or medications, like hormones. There's so many things involved besides just calories. And I think so many people get into this and they maybe in the past have, like you said, they've counted calories, they've counted Weight
Yeah.
Watchers points, and it can be really scary to like give up the numbers, I guess. But I think what I find is a lot of people, again, that grocery list I'll share with you is like, okay, let's
Yes.
try to get back to like mostly, primarily like whole foods. Like, and you find that the calories work themselves out and really working on like quality versus quantity.
Mhm.
So, like getting some healthy fats in, which again, like high Weight Watchers points, like
Right.
it can be a little bit scary, but it's like, guess what? When you're really focusing on quality, you're not going to be as hungry. You're going to make it from meal to meal without snacking. And it's going to like free up your mental capacity to worry about other things too.
See, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a really good segue. How important is the mental component when it comes to the nutrition aspect and like when trying to get over these stalls and regains?
I can't emphasize, like, mindset enough, and I tell people it's like they're like, "What's the first thing I should be working on?" Like, "I'm thinking about surgery." It's like, you better work on that mindset and, like, your relationship with food because if you tend to, like, have an emotional attachment to food, which I think we all do,
Mhm.
to some degree, and if that's your coping mechanism now, you're gonna be really frustrated when after surgery that's limited, or you've lost that coping mechanism when you're restricted on how much you can eat, and now you have to look for other outlets, and like you had mentioned, things like transfer addiction, like, I
Mhm.
think that's why we see that so much after surgery is because now we don't have as much volume to work with. We're not getting that
Right.
comfort from food. It's like, well, maybe I can get it through alcohol or, other substance abuse. And unfortunately, that's, part of the reality. But the mindset component is huge. And I think just kind of battling that all or nothing, is really tough and it takes some time. So like doing that hard work and the mental
Mhm.
work. So if you like, I think journaling is one of the best things that you can do is
Yeah.
just like getting your thoughts out on paper because once that pen hits the paper or if you have an electronic journal, like you'd be surprised at just what comes out. So that's something I've incorporated with my program is like daily journal prompts. And if somebody really wants to like track something, it's like, okay, if you want to track your food, like let's do it on paper and you're going to write
Mhm.
down like times and emotions. Like I'm not worried about how many calories it is, but let's look
Right.
at like what's your mood around food.
I love that. And I know that and I've been part of other groups before where we all talk about like how this all or nothing mentality is not the good way to go. I'm a perfect example of that. I've always had this all or nothing mentality, like I have to go big or I have to go home. And the biggest wake up call for me is this year. I've finally had like breaking my stall for 5 years that I had had like 50 pounds of regain. I've lost it all. And then I have energy and I want to do everything. And anything that somebody suggested doing, I was like, let's go. I was sprinting. I was, doing the 75 hard. I went on in a pole dancing. I started doing all of these things my body had never done before. And I'm not one. Don't just give me the easy stuff. I'm like, let's go into it. And because I was so excited that my body can do things that it's never been able to do before. And then, like we've talked about a month ago, my back completely went out. And I went from being extremely active to having to work from bed. I'm not allowed to do anything. I can't go for a walk. And all of a sudden you feel like you're 350 pounds again, completely immobile. And I was like, was it worth it? Did I have to like go big every single time and push myself to the extreme every single time? Because now look what happened. Now I'm not allowed to do anything. And here we are a month later, and I'm slowly getting acclimated. I just started walking again. I went to the gym for the first time, and I have to take everything really slowly, and I'm learning. But obviously, that mindset did not work for me at all.
Mhm. Right. And I think when it comes to nutrition, like one thing that I preach to my people is like the 80-20 rule. So it's like, okay, make 80% of your food choices from here. The rest of the 20% is like fair game. So nothing's off limits
Ah,
because I think after surgery, it's like you think you're never going to eat like quote
yeah,
unquote a normal person again. And it's like, I think that's nothing farther from the truth. It's like, it's not that much different. It's like, yes, portions, might be different, or you might have an extra emphasis on things like protein, but I don't think that that makes you, it doesn't mean that you're not going to enjoy your favorite foods again.
no, and I agree. And I'm glad that you said something because, like I said, like there's a ton of food police out in social media that, like, you can, like, anybody who's like, I had a slice of pizza. Oh my God, you are damned to hell because, like, you cheated and, like, you have no respect for your sleeve at all. And you're like, I'm 8 years out. Like, I'm doing okay. Like, you can have a slice of pizza. Don't eat the entire box. Like, you can learn how to have self control. And I think that when you have the mindset, like you said, all or nothing, if I, when I do these challenges and you can't have any cheat meals because you're committing to 30 days or whatever the challenge is,
Mhm.
the minute that you take sugar out of the diet or I can't have a donut, all I'm doing is thinking about it. I wasn't
Mhm.
thinking about it before, but now it's like the forbidden fruit. Now that I can't have it, that's all I'm going to think about. And I think a lot of people have that same mentality when they cut something out completely and say that I can never have this. And then all you're doing is thinking about it to the one day that you finally break and you cave and you don't have half of one. You have 3 or 4 of them because in your head, you're like, I'm not going to eat it ever again. I need to take as much as I can right now. And that's a bad, terrible downfall of
Right. And then
the
I
cooking.
better eat them all tonight so that way they're not there tomorrow when
Right.
I like start all over again.
Right.
Yeah, and I think too, like having your foods, like even pairing them, like if it's something like, chocolate or whatever you're telling yourself you can't have, it's like pair that up with a meal because you're going to get more satisfied from it.
Right.
You're going to be able to like enjoy that alongside other things and probably minimize like maybe the effect on your blood sugar, which
Mhm.
I think again can help you just like manage those cravings down the road. But
Yeah.
I like to tell my people too is like, instead of telling yourself like, no, just like think later. Like, okay, well, I'm not
Mhm.
hungry now. Like, I'll have it later if I still want it. And I think
Right.
that just helps like allow giving yourself permission versus like, no, it's off limits. And then, like you said, we start to like fixate on that.
Yes.
So,
I'm a
mhm.
big fixator. I love that Jason wrote in and said that journaling at the end of the day is like a data dump or clearing your cache. And I
Yeah,
agree
I
because
love that.
I absolutely love that because how many times, I used to think that I used to be so
I'm ready.
overweight for so long was because I carried the weight of the world. And like, I was everybody's, verbal dump session too when they were upset or frustrated. And I carried all of this onto me. And I never personally had a way to get it out of me. So I always
Mhm.
thought that metaphorically I was just holding on to all of these things. And that's why the weight would never come off. And then something happened. When I had the surgery, I started blogging from day one. And like every emotion that I was feeling, everything that I was going through, I just kept writing about it. And I noticed the days that I wrote about it, I felt almost like this more clear headedness to me. It was like you
Mhm.
emotionally like got it out of you. You weren't holding. And I'm like, this is amazing. Why was I not doing this the entire time? And I do encourage other people, write your feelings down because sometimes we get so consumed with the day-to-day and the day-to-day stresses and being immersed in like the tornado that you don't realize what's causing it. And sometimes by just like sitting down and writing down everything that happened that day and what you were feeling, I feel like you can start to kind of feel the clues in the future. So like when it's starting to happen again, you're like, oh
Mhm.
wait, this happened last time, and that explained everything, and you can kind of like rectify it in your head, and over time learn to deal with your stuff better.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like you're talking about like identifying your triggers, like,
Yes.
and then you can kind of plan ahead or prevent things. Absolutely. And I think like when we think about like the emotions or like even like emotional eating, I think
Hmm.
a lot of times we crave like that change in emotion versus like actually craving food itself. It's like
Yeah.
that's there to maybe numb or comfort, but it's like what's that change in emotion that you're craving? Are you feeling lonely and you're
Hmm.
wanting to connect with somebody? Like what's a healthier coping mechanism? Or are you angry or stressed or feeling underappreciated? Like digging
Right.
into those emotions, like you said, I think help identify those triggers and be like, okay, well, what's a healthier way to cope with this? And it's not going to be like 100% perfect once you have
Right.
those triggers identified. But if you're like, okay, well, I caught myself this time, maybe I'll journal it out or, try to do that 50% of the time.
Right.
Mhm.
Now, are you somebody who normally likes like attention on yourself, or like you like to be out and like you're more shy?
Yes, I'm definitely more introverted. So, yeah, why did I say that I like the hot seat when we first started?
No,
I
but
think I
this
just
is,
like more of like the conversational. It wasn't like we had like, okay, we're gonna talk about this, this, and
yeah.
this. It's just like, okay, yeah,
No, and
let's
I
roll.
warned you, like, it's mostly we're just shooting the shit. It's basically people are just watching us shooting the shit, and then they get to join in,
Yeah,
and it's fun. But
yeah.
it's interesting that you said that. So I'm curious to know how you decided, hey, I think it'll be a good idea to make some videos and put them on TikTok. Like
Oh my God, I
how does
hated
that come
it.
about?
Yeah. And you think of like, I wonder how many like I've actually deleted versus actually posts. Like
Oh, story of
how
my
many,
life.
like how many do you go through? I would love to see like that B-roll of like
Yes.
everybody like before, like how many, rounds it takes to get the TikTok. But I think the biggest thing is I wanted to just educate because I feel like this community, especially, it's like we were kind of joking about like how terrible some of that nutrition advice is, like on
Yeah.
social media or Facebook pages, and I just wanted people to have a reliable source. And I feel like nowadays it's like social media is just like a necessary evil sometimes, and I think it's a great way to communicate as well and just do it in, bite-sized pieces too, because I think like as a dietitian, it's like, oh my gosh, I have so much I want to share and, teach, but it's like, okay, I don't want to like, hit you with the water hose either. But if
Right.
I can just like trickle things out, here and there, then I think that helps with the education piece and what one person hears, might be different for another person.
Right. And that's what I love. Like, I don't think like there's no one size fits all for everything. Like, there's no one size fits all sleeve. There are certain dietitians that are going to mesh well with other patients, and
Mhm.
vice versa. I love that there's a lot of options out there, and your videos, they're so personable. They're filled with really great information, and somebody might view it and be like, yeah, that doesn't apply to me. That's okay. This is the people who are resonating it are the ones that are going to have it applied to them and that they enjoy it. So then what was it like a gradual thing, or did something happen and then all of a sudden you go from like a couple followers and then just like freaking explode?
I had a viral reel or a viral TikTok. So it was all about resistant starches, thrilling
Oh, it's
stuff. So,
exciting. So
yeah.
exciting. What is a resistance starch?
Yeah. So basically, okay, so I'll back up and a resistant starch. So basically, when you cook and cool things like rice, like pasta, potatoes, it can minimize the impact on your blood sugar, like big time.
Hmm.
So basically, like I said, when you prep your proteins, prep your carbs too, because when you cook and cool, they create a resistant starch. So basically, like once those like potatoes or rice like granules like cool, they kind of like gelatinize and tighten up, and then your digestive enzymes can't access them. So it makes it almost more like a fiber. So it's
Really?
almost like thinking about like regular white rice and say it does this to your blood sugar. Well, maybe
Uh-huh.
now it's doing like this. For those that are listening, it's like, okay, like mountain peaks versus like rolling hills. And when it comes
Right.
to like appetite, that's going to be really key is like preventing those really big mountain peaks in your blood sugar, because then we're always like rebounding. And that's where like carb cravings especially come in. So if you cook and cool your carbs, you can heat them up. Yes, I think I had, 10,000 comments about reheating. So, but yes,
Yeah.
you can, like, once they're cooled, you can heat them back up and you still get the same effect. So basically, you can like cook and cool your rice, heat it back up, and you don't have to feel bad about having it. So,
So, like,
mhm,
hypothetically, if I had had rice and I ate it the next day and it was still cold, for the sake of argument, does that mean
mhm.
it's worse for you and how
No,
your
it's
body
better.
reacts to it? Oh, it's better to eat it cold?
Better. Yeah, so if you are eating, like, cold, like, cooled starches, or again, like, say you cooked that rice, cooled it down, and now you're heating it up for lunch the next day, like, you still get that benefit. It's all about that cooling process.
Oh, so it's actually better than getting it right out of the oven or right when you cook it.
Mhm. Right.
I've never heard that before. That's interesting.
Yes, so I said that was, like, my guilt-free carb tip, and then that went viral on TikTok, so
You know
yeah.
what's funny is I remember somebody made a comment that if you have bariatric surgery, you can never microwave your food again. And that was like the first time I'd ever heard that. Her doctor just said, like, yeah, you can never microwave. And I'm like, that would suck. Obviously, I think that we're not really
Yeah.
technically supposed to be microwaving our food. We should be like reheating it in the oven or another way. But I thought that was really interesting. And I've never heard it since. It was just one person.
I'm guessing that was, like, maybe, like, a one-off, like, opinion. I would say if you are gonna reheat, like, maybe try it in, like, glass or on, like, a ceramic
Mm,
plate, but I don't know, I feel weird about, like, heating stuff in plastic, especially if it's, like,
yeah.
something that's cheese, and then you're like, "Okay, why is this, like, white film and bubbles, like, happening all over my Tupperware?" It's like, you can't tell me that's not, like, leaching into your food somehow,
Right.
so I would say, yeah, if you're gonna use the microwave, like, maybe try glass, but I would say, like, frozen meals, I love for my clients just because it's, like, after surgery, they're portion controlled, a lot of times
Yeah.
they are smaller servings, and it's like, if you get there's a lot more options now, but you can get something that's, 20, 30 grams of protein in a little meal.
Yeah, I actually thought about making a TikTok on what on because I've been eating like these protein bowls. It'll be like
Mhm,
cauliflower rice, and it's like a Greek chicken one. It has like feta cheese, and I think the entire portion is like 170 calories, but it had like 23 or 24 grams of
mhm.
protein, and I'm like, this is perfect for me. Obviously, my husband does not concur. He's like, I need real man food. Um, but for me, it's like the perfect portion. And to Jen, who said that her friends are telling her she should post on TikTok, I think you should. There's something very therapeutic about it when you put stuff out there. One thing that I've noticed about TikTok, for the most part, it's extremely supportive of other people, especially in the community. And then, like, just like Kayla said, I can't tell you how many deleted drafts I've had on my phone to make one video. And I can't tell, especially in the summertime when I would go on my walks. People who know me know that I am very terrified of bees. And there's been a handful of drafts of like trying to make this TikTok and talk to people, and a bee flies right by my ear, and I like spaz and like have like a freak out. And I'm like, maybe those are the ones I should post on there, but yeah, I can't do
Mhm.
that.
And Jen, it
Um,
gets easier with time too. And I think
yes.
too, like, it gets easier, like, your first couple are gonna be just, like, really difficult to put up, but it gets easier, and I would say, like, speak from that like, speak what you wanna say, not what you
Hmm.
think other people wanna hear. Because I feel like if you're trying to, like, tell people what you think they want to hear, then
Yeah.
it just doesn't come across as authentic, like, just say what's on your mind, and I think the goal isn't to appeal to everybody. It's like, yes, you're never going to be what's that one saying? It's like, you could be the ripest peach in the world, but not everybody loves peaches,
Right.
So it's like you're not going to jive with everybody, and that's okay because then you can just have your people that, you're closer with.
Yeah. And my thing
Mhm.
is like when I make videos, my first priority is like, does it make me happy? Does it make me laugh? Does it like, entertain me? And because I feel like if you get to the point, if you're trying to do it for other people, you're never going to be have 100% fans. Like I feel like everyone's always going to be a critic. So as long as you're posting things that you enjoy, then people are going to come along and they're going to enjoy it with you. But I think when you're trying to appease everybody and do what you think everybody's going to want to see, I feel like you're setting yourself up for failure.
Mhm. I know, and even, like, as a dietitian, like, I'm always super paranoid. I'm like, "What if the research changes, or what if I didn't
Right.
research enough?" I'm just like, "What if I say something that's maybe, like, evidence guided, but not evidence based?" If I'm not,
Right.
like, 100% factual, it's like, "Oh my gosh, am I gonna be, like, torn apart by other dietitians or the bariatric community. So
Yeah, but
yeah.
I feel like things are always changing.
Hmm.
So as long as you're always keeping up with it, like I can see like if they came out tomorrow and see like we can never have Fairlife again because the protein in our body breaks down like what blah 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 blah, then you're gonna have to adapt and you're gonna have to find new solutions. But like, um, so see, I told you this was gonna happen. We only have like 10 minutes left, which
Oh
is
my
crazy.
gosh.
It happens every time. Um, I want to make sure that I don't have it. So, one thing I want to give you the floor for a little bit, and I want you to talk about kind of what your program is about, because I know that people, and what we'll do after the show is I can put in the comments like a link to if you have like a website, if however people can get in contact with you if they want to ask questions or if they want to sign up for your services. Can you tell us a little bit about what you offer in your program?
Yes. So my main program is I have a women's only group membership. So I do everything through an app. So basically, it's like, I feel like if it's not on your phone nowadays, it's like not getting your attention. So it's like there's a feed where I'm posting every day. So all of our journal prompts are there. We've got weekly live calls. There's education and support that I trickle down. We do like monthly challenges. There's one-on-one messaging with me too. And starting next month in October, so probably by the time this maybe rolls out on other platforms, I'm going to have implemented a weekly check-in where I can, touch in one-on-one with people and give them personalized support, because I feel like in the group setting, sometimes it can be easy to hide or get lost. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I want to make sure that everyone's there, like achieving their goals. So you get that one on one support from me. And then you also get the community aspect and the group support. And then that is monthly. So you can join for as little or as long as you want. I would say I have anywhere from like pre op to, man, I want to say I have someone who's like maybe 10 or 12 years like post-op. So there's
Oh wow!
quite a range. So it's really nice just to see people like comforting each other and stuff when things maybe when I can't speak to it because I haven't had surgery. So it's nice just to be
Right.
able to rely on other women. But there's all kinds of resources that we have as well. There's a habit tracker. So we focus a lot on daily habits and just like working on habits, because I think so often we get wrapped up in like goals. And I think
Mm-hmm.
like, what's the one thing that like you hit a goal and you lose all your momentum or you stop doing all the things that got you there in the first place? So we really work on habits that are going to help you achieve the results that
Oh.
you want. So I have that's my main monthly program. And then coming soon, so like hopefully in the next week, I am going to be launching a back on track program. So it's 10 days,
Ah.
it's short and it's packed full. So it's not the group component, but it's working through things more like one-on-one or like with me through the feed. And that 10-day program is hopefully going to be launching again like within the next week. I'm working with the app developers to get like a few timing things figured out. So that kind of gives you a taste of like all of the nutrition philosophies that I go through. So we focus a lot on like nutrition, emotional eating, and
Yes.
habits is another big one. So not so much on the activity piece, but more so on nutrition. So I'll give you the links to those as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And anybody who wants to reach out to Kayla or be part of her program or anything, I'll make sure that in the comments after the show, I'll put all of her links and everything. And that just inspired me to ask a question. I was going to ask it to you earlier and then I forget to write it down. And then I almost like got off the show and forgot to ask. I'm pretty sure I already know the answer to this, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the pouch reset that people talk about.
Oh my God, they're the worst.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought you were going to say, but I was
Yes.
just,
Well, I think of like the pouch reset as like the ultimate all or nothing. Like we were talking
yes.
about all or nothing. And it's like, I think so often we think that we have to just feel like complete restriction or completely miserable to be able to like achieve the results we want, when it's like, again, let's not overcomplicate things. Like we can, with a few like tweaks in your nutrition, it's like we can help you feel hunger, help you feel
Right.
full and prevent hunger, and maybe dial into some of that emotional eating, whether it's through journaling or other methods. And I think pouch resets do none of that. If anything, I think it makes you take a step back and really kind of regress. So please don't ever do a pouch reset.
I
Mhm. My
I
back
do.
and track program would be a great substitute for
Yes.
for
Because
that.
I can tell you, years ago, I've tried it before, like 4 or 5 years ago. I personally am not a fan of it. There might be people watching this that say, "Hey, I did it and it was exactly what I needed, and I was able to sustain it afterwards." More power to you. I think that's incredible. Like if it worked for you, awesome. I think for the vast majority of people, I think what happens is you go from like eating unhealthy or the slider foods and the emotional eating, and then you cut everything out for a few days, and yeah, you feel good. You might lose a couple pounds of water weight. You're like, yeah, I got this. But when you're depriving yourself that much, I'm not a doctor, but I've noticed for me that when the time that you eat that first meal afterwards, it comes right back. and
Mhm.
and then and then you feel even worse. And then again, for me, when I completely remove everything, I get so inside my head that all I'm doing is thinking about all these things that I can't have, and I'm miserable, and I'm like a stupid protein shake, and I'm like the stupid eggs, and you're not enjoying it. And like I'm a big believer in small changes will have much better rewards down the road. That it's a what does it say? It's a like when it's not a marathon, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Is
Mhm.
that the right phrase?
And it's a marathon that never ends, I think
Yes.
too, and it's like, yes, that's not, like, real great information, but I think the reality is, like, habits, like you said, those small
Mm,
things that you're doing day in and day out, it's like, that's all the B-roll that we don't see, like, you get the feature
right.
film moments where it's, like, very climactic, and you get the before and after
Mm,
pictures, but you don't get any of that in between,
right.
like your intro said, like, "I wanna hear what's between the before and after
Yes.
picture." Mhm.
I'm so glad, and that's like the whole purpose of the show is we want to show like all of the in between before that before and after picture. Because yeah, and like even with me, like I said, I have a very bad problem having the all or nothing mentality, and when I've done these challenges, the minute that the challenge is over, and I'm like I feel incredible, I feel very accomplished and stuff like that, but I don't have like the long term structure. So then
Mhm.
like I had the structure, I followed this plan every single day for 30 days, and then it's over and you allow your body to rest and like kind of recoup from it. But then all of a sudden a week goes by and you're still not doing anything, or you're not really back on track. And it was kind of like just like with a pouch reset in your head, you prepared yourself in 5 days, I can eat normal food again. So it's like
Mhm.
I can tough it out, I can tough it out because you have like this end in sight. Whereas you can't look at it as having an end in sight. You have to look at it that there's never going to be an end in sight. So I can't, change everything tomorrow, but if I can make small changes to make sure that at least today is slightly better than yesterday, and over time, they become new habits. They just become a part of your daily life.
Mhm.
And at least now for me, with the exception of having my back go out, now once you've not been able to do those things and now that I'm able to come back, I'm like I'm never taking this for granted again. So my goal is every day I do something. I'm not going out and running marathons, I'm not going on stripper poles and taking classes, but if it's just a 20-minute walk today, it's something better than I did yesterday. And I think that the more you make these little small 1% changes, I think you're going to have the most optimal results long term.
Absolutely, 100%. Okay, I have this is like my all-time favorite book recommendations, but
I read
yes,
that book.
yes, it's so good. So if
Yes.
anyone talking like you saying like 1% better every day, he even has like a free newsletter that's amazing. So like
Really?
jamesclear.com. Yes, it's like the one newsletter I look forward to getting. So,
That was the first book that I read when I was doing the 75 hard because you have to
mhm,
read 10 pages every day. And that was the book
yeah,
that I read. And I love the idea when he was talking about 1%. I'm like, in my head, like this all or nothing. I'm like, that's
right.
not gonna work. And then
Yep.
when you think about like when he was talking about there was like a part in the book where he was talking about I think the bicyclists and how they made
Mhm,
like it was like this 1% change that in the grand scheme you're like that's not going to do anything, but every single day by the time the big race came they were faster and they were breaking all of these records, and it was all because they were consistently getting better. It's called Atomic Habits, and it's James Clear, right?
yes, I
Yeah,
believe
James
that.
Clear. It's actually an excellent book. I just read it this year, and I'm not
Mhm,
much of a book reader personally, but
mhm.
this one grabbed my attention, and I read the whole thing. And I know some people will read it multiple times too.
Yes, he was actually on a podcast with, so I love, like, Peter Attia, he has the Drive podcast, and he had James Clear on, and it's like a 2-hour podcast,
Really?
but it's like the cliff notes of the book, so if you prefer to listen, I've listened to it and I've read it, and I think either way, there's, like, you almost have to pause, and I think I've, like, highlighted half the book,
Yeah.
but that podcast is, like, a great, like, free resource too.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Which I can't believe that we're basically out of time, but I do want to give you the floor. First and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. You were so gracious, like we were reaching out to each other, and I was like, "There's no way this chick's gonna want to talk to me." But you've been so amazing, and I'm very very grateful. And I do want to be able to give you the floor if there's anything like any final thoughts or anything that you would like to plug, talk about, or mention.
I think just to well, first of all, thank you for having me. No, it's been a pleasure. It's always fun, like, doing, like, very, like, casual conversations like
Yeah.
this, and I think it's just a good format for people to be able to interact. It's really nice to, like, read everybody's comments, and hopefully they can see them too, but, I think the biggest thing, like, for anyone that's maybe watching or listening it's like you have options. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're maybe experiencing regain, I would say a lot of times I tell people like if you're comfortable with your clinic, like reach out. If you're feeling really stuck, like that's a great spot to start just to ask for help, which I think along this journey not everybody is used to
Yeah.
doing. So I think when you kind of find yourself whether you're preparing for or after surgery, it's like putting yourself first isn't probably something that you're used to and it takes time and it takes practice so I would say, first of all, like you have options. So whether it's, changing behaviors or medications or whatever the, thing may be, I think your clinic is a good spot, but there's resources out there too. And if you feel like maybe you're trying to consume all the information, like narrow it down to a
Mm.
few people or unfollow or leave some like Facebook groups if you find that maybe they're toxic or
Mhm.
you're just like leaving those groups maybe feeling a little bit like heavier emotionally
Yeah.
or maybe more confused, like follow a few people that you connect with and listen to what they have to say because I think that clarity and just having some sort of a filter on all of that information, like we can Google anything now or follow, all these people on social media. And it can be overwhelming when you're getting like mixed messages or 10 different messages a day. So
Mhm.
just really kind of putting that lens on and using what's specific to you.
Absolutely. And Jason, you're so right. Self-care is not selfish. I used to think that it was, but now I've come to realize I can't be of service or help to anyone if my glass is always empty.
Mhm. Right,
And
and there's people I think out there too, it's like that are there to help, so it's like that's,
Mhm.
my living, it's like I think, you think of how hard it is to ask for help, but it's like,
Mhm.
you're helping me fulfill my purpose to help by,
Right.
asking for help, and I think sometimes just that can be really comforting to know that, okay, there's people out there as well.
Definitely ask. I'm not one who usually asks for help. That's always been you think that you can handle the world on your own, and then until one day happens and you can't. So I'm a firm believer that if you are stuck in life, even if you don't know what the answer is or who to ask specifically, start asking for help because somebody can always put you in the right direction or put you in contact with somebody who can relate to you and be able to help you out.
Mhm.
Kayla, thank you so much, seriously, for everything today. A lot of the questions that were asked today were ones that I had come up with. But if there's any specific questions that you want to ask Kayla or that you hope that she would answer, we're going to assume that we didn't scare her away and that she might actually come back again and answer more questions. Um,
Yes,
see, this is
you can always message me too. I'll include my email or like you can see my name here on the screen. Like you can find me either on TikTok or Instagram at Kayla Girgen RD. And I'm always happy if you DM me, I'm happy to communicate there one on one.
absolutely.
But yes,
On
I will come back.
Okay, I was like, oh my god, she's not saying she's gonna come
Yes.
back. It's like that awkward, like, yeah, maybe I
Yeah.
will. No, I'm not going to. Um, but all right, thank you so much to everyone who's been watching, and thank you so much for the comments. Like I said, if you have any additional questions or comments, you can always reach out to me or Kayla directly. If you want to be on the show, please reach out to me. I'd love to share your story. We have a lot of really amazing guests coming up that I'm really excited about as well. And on that note, I hope you guys all have an amazing week, and we'll see you next week.